Hello and welcome to It's No Secret. I'm Christine.
And I'm Kat.
And today on the podcast, we are celebrating a few very exciting milestones. So, firstly, today is the 2-year anniversary of the podcast. Can you believe it has been 2 years already since we started chatting away?
So exciting.
Can you believe it? I feel like it's been a good time, a wild ride. But so many years left on us.
Exactly. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
So much more chat to come. The second milestone is that we are just about to hit 100,000 downloads. So if you're watching the video, you'll see we have some very cool balloons behind us, which is 100,000. So yeah, we're very excited and proud of, just the commitment and how many people that we've been able to reach. That is no easy feat. And there's just the people that we know of as well. So yeah. And then the last celebration is, of course, we very intentionally started the podcast on International Women's Day. So in light of it being the 2 years anniversary, today is also International Women's Day. So yeah, very excited to celebrate what is the best day of every year, other than our birthdays and Christmas, obviously. Oh yeah, so in light of this and to celebrate, we thought we would reflect on the 2 years that have been and share 5 timeless money lessons that we each have learnt since starting the podcast. So I'm going to throw Kat right into it as always. Kat, what are 5 lessons that you've had or learnt?
Love this. So I am going to go through this rapid fire because we have promised ourselves that we're going to keep this short, sharp and punctual.
Nice.
So lesson number 1 is your self-control is worse than you think. Therefore, you need to automate it. And I feel like if you've listened to any of our Money Moments episodes in the last 2 years, you would probably have been on this journey with us. Reflecting on this personally, my self-control has been terrible in terms of, where I rate myself versus what I actually end up doing. And so the moral of the story is, having been through 2 years of having automated finances and then not having automated finances and then going back to automated finances, just automate it. It makes it so much easier. What do I mean by that? The real simple basics, like don't overcomplicate it. You want to do the things that are setting up automatic payments, those sorts of things. Auto investing, exactly. The day you get paid, making sure that money goes into separate accounts based on your goals, all of that kind of stuff is super, super important. And the other thing I wanted to say on this, because I've also recently been through this experience, is just regrouping on the idea that separating your fun money and your discretionary expenses from your day-to-day account, i.e. where your like rent or mortgage or bills come out from, is a great idea, because you then, particularly in a time where cost of living is really high and inflation feels like it's everywhere, it's a lot easier to actually track that your lifestyle creep is not getting out of control.
Yeah, nice. That's a great tip I'm going to take away. Love it.
I redid that yesterday, so stand by for updates soon as to whether or not it's successful.
Where the lesson is implemented.
Exactly. The lesson has been implemented, so let's see if we manage to stick to it. So on that, point number 2 is, you will do more than you think, and like a year is not a long time. And I think reflecting on this, as you said at the start, like it's been 2 years since we started the podcast, and I feel like if you tallied up all the goals and various financial things that we have actually individually done in the last 2 years and talked about openly on the show in the last 2 years, it's huge, right? Yeah. And if we went back to day 1 of, hey, Christine, do you think like in the next year or 2 years, what are you going to achieve? I guarantee you probably wouldn't put all of those things on your list, and I think it's just one of those traps that we fall into as human beings, that we underestimate how much we can achieve in a short period of time, underestimate how much we can achieve in a long period of time, and overestimate how much we can perhaps achieve in like the next month, right? Yeah. And it's like you just sometimes need a bit of time to pass to actually see how far you've come. It's not always the funnest to hear that when you're in the moment wanting to achieve all the things. That's just take it from someone that's, particularly feels like we've done a lot in the last 2 years. Yeah, that was my key takeaway for money and life and career.
That's a great one. Yeah, I was going to say for career as well. It's so applicable.
Crossover to everything.
And travel, like go scroll back through your phone, look at the photos and look at all the places that you may or may not have been in the last couple of years. I feel like it's quite surprising. Or even just like people that you've met, things that you've done. Yeah. So applicable. Yeah.
Different things that have happened. A lot can happen, and a year is not a long time. It goes super fast. And you've made a lot of progress before you even really planned on it. Number 3 on the progress track is setting benchmarks and tracking your progress. And what do I mean by this? I don't mean like set a benchmark and then try and beat it like, an active fund manager. What I mean is as a personal, just as an individual who is working towards any kind of like personal financial goals or career goals, you do want to set those benchmarks so that you have something to look back on, because again, you will achieve more in the period of time than you think you will. And it's actually really cool to have something concrete. For us, we've talked about this before. I think we both run kind of like balance sheet spreadsheets where we track, our assets and liabilities and take a snapshot at certain periods of time. At the moment, I only do mine once a year, and it's the end of every year. And sometimes when you feel like you've had a really challenging year, or you feel like you're making small steps towards your progress, it's so nice to look back and think, oh my goodness, although the last 6 months only feel like I've made a small step in progress, actually looking back over the last 2-3 years, I am materially better off, or, in a much better place than I was. And sometimes you need that reality check for yourself.
Yep.
Right?
Love that.
So yeah, benchmarks, progress, spreadsheets, done. Okay.
Sums up Kat. Nice.
Literally. My 4th lesson would be, and I feel like this is super timely, but just, it's one of those things you hear and maybe you don't actually take it on until you're living it, but just remembering that everything is cyclical. This relates to markets, it relates to recessions, to interest rates, and your success. Sometimes you feel like you're crushing it, and other times you feel super overwhelmed, but you will always come out the other side. And I think it's really important to remember in both the positive times, like recognizing that now I'm in a really good place and it may not always be like this. So let's, do some things that are fun, because we're all about that life, but also are future proofing, knowing that there is always going to be, a cyclical on the downside as well. And so you want to be, I guess, just feeling positive about the future and knowing that things come in swings and roundabouts. Try not to get yourself bogged down in a time where perhaps you maybe are feeling like you've got a lot of expenses, or you're not quite in where you want to be with your career, because those things do come out the other side as well.
Yeah,
I feel like I've really lived that in the last 2 years. In terms of like, I think for me, this is probably my biggest one, right? Because right now, although life feels like the most expensive it's ever been, we've also reached this point as a household. We're now earning the most amount of money that we ever have in our lives, but you rewind barely 12 months and we were at one income. My husband had just had 18 months off work. We didn't know what the future of his job held. And, at the time, everything feels all consuming.
Cool. Yeah.
But it takes just, I think, a little bit of time to step out of your own head and go, okay, this is cyclical. Things will pass. Things will change. Let's not get too bogged down in either the positive or the negative.
Yeah. It reminds me of the saying, you go through seasons in life. And that was a difficult season. And now, you've come out the other side. Yeah. Better than ever. And so
yes, but then I'm also like, okay, well, we could go back there, so let's not be too frivolous. Hence my point around lifestyle creep. Make sure that when you come out the other side and you're on the upswing of what is a good cycle, make sure you're making smart decisions around your money in those times, so that then when you get to a future state, and I guarantee we'll get back to a future state where we perhaps are not feeling as confident or strong about our money, potentially we have income changes or job changes, whatever it is, we feel less impacted by that than we have in the past. That's the takeout lesson for me.
Yeah, love that.
Yeah.
I just keep thinking of so many parallels, the rising mortgage rates. For a lot of people, that will be, a phase or a cyclical kind of time. So just know that you're going to get through it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Love that. Positivity for everyone. Okay. My 5th and final point would be that I feel like we've really learnt in the last 2 years. Well, I've learnt this, I feel like my whole career, but the last 2 years in particular, that people always want to know the nitty-gritty about money. And we all get, and I truly believe this hand on heart, we all get a lot of value from honest, vulnerable sharing. And I think sometimes saying this, people feel like, I actually just had, sorry, quick tangent. I just had a coffee with someone that I've met through work who is super lovely, who spent a lot of time, she's Kiwi, but she spent a lot of time in Australia working. She's married to an Australian. She has 2 children that were born in Australia. So she kind of,
oh my gosh.
I was.
I
was. And we were talking about like the differences in corporate life here versus there. And she said that the one thing that she notices even in work is no one likes talking about money. And she's like, well, she works in marketing. She's like, I work in an industry where I need to know, like, how much is that going to cost? You're asking for sponsorship or a pitch. Like, how much money do you want from me? And she's like, this back and forward between, oh, you know, whatever works for you or whatever you can spend. She's like, no, cut the bullshit. Just tell me how much money you want. And I was like, thank you. And she said that her view of New Zealanders, having been elsewhere in the world, is that we're even more like unsure about talking about money than say the Brits, right? And that's not helpful for anyone. It's not helpful for her in her job. It's not helpful for you in your life. You know, being open and vulnerable with people around what you are maybe doing differently or the same as others. Also asking other people what you could be doing. Another great thing, someone came to me the other day and said, hey Kat, they're also not from New Zealand. They've only lived and worked in New Zealand for 2 years, and they're like, I don't know if I'm getting paid enough money, and I have no one in New Zealand to ask, because where I come from, you know, pay bands are very different to what they are here, and I just actually don't know if the salary that I'm on is reasonable, and how do I go about talking about that? And I was like, thank you so much for bringing this up, because the worst thing for that person could be that they sit on that question for quite a while. Yeah, exactly. Could materially affect their outcome, and they just don't know. And it's like, I look at, I guess, scenarios like that, and I think, you know, all it takes is some confidence and the guts to overcome the awkwardness of the question. You know, and then the person doesn't have to answer you. If that's the other thing, right? If they feel deeply uncomfortable, I could have said, oh, I'm maybe not the best person to ask, and kind of fobbed her off and maybe point her in another direction. That's the worst case scenario. The best case scenario is that other person is more than happy to engage in that conversation, and you both get something out of it. And that's where I just think that, you know, people want to know the details. They need to know the details. It helps everyone to be honest and vulnerable. So get on board, guys.
On the talking about money generally as well, it makes me think of how a lot of freelancers or people who, like small businesses, hate for asking for their invoices to be paid. Yes. And in New Zealand, we're notoriously bad at just not paying things on time. Yeah. Yet really, we're also a nation with so many small businesses. You would think that, you know, like we would pay the small businesses on time first. But it is like, it's kind of it is the honesty of just being like, look, I have, you know, people to pay, mouths to feed, things like that. You know?
Exactly. And, you know, I think of like reflecting back on some of the things that Luke and I now have as financial goals and some of the things we're working towards. I'm like, we've only arrived at those ideas through conversations with other people, because through those conversations do you find out what perhaps other people do differently that you haven't considered in the past. You know, maybe get some ideas yourself. You know, there's one thing we've also learned is like there's no conventional path when it comes to building wealth or money or your career anymore, particularly in this day and age. I'm sure the lovely Gen X in this room or Tim's like, I'm not a Gen X cat. No, he's a Gen Z. Will be like, you know, there's no conventional way to live your life anymore. Like, people are very open to that. And so you need to have those conversations to find out what you could do.
Yeah, I'm so here for it.
Yeah.
Love it.
So yeah, on that note, I feel like we'll be having more honest money conversations with Kiwis and Australians around the world.
Yeah. Kat calls up every Aussie she knows.
Yeah, literally, because they'll say yes and actually want to talk about it.
Yeah, exactly. But we are actually bringing back more Money Moments episodes, so you can look forward to that.
Yes, because everyone wants the nitty-gritty, including us.
Exactly. So actually, if you have anyone that you know that wants to speak on the pod, or if you want to, please get in touch with us.
Shout out. Love to hear it.
Yeah, definitely. Okay,
so cool. They're my 5.
I think they were great. Nice and concise.
Thank you.
Great work.
Yeah.
I'm going to try to do the same. I'm going to start with the one that overlapped because that'll just knock it off. So my money lesson number 1 is automation. So
love that we both said this.
Yeah. All I have here is that it's the foundation of everything.
It is.
So I have also been over the last 2 years on a bit of a like up, down. Do I use this? Do I not? So it has been a bit of a stop-start thing. But the consistent theme has been every time I do have that in place to pay myself first and I'm auto-investing, that's where I really start to feel the progress compounding over time. Yeah. And so it's quite satisfying also to see that money build up. But then that leads perfectly into number 2, which is test and learn. So One thing that I have, and possibly the reason that I've stopped it, is because I don't know if I've quite figured out what that bottom threshold is to like what I can auto invest or auto save consistently over time without needing to dip into it.
Yes.
So it has been a bit of a trial and error, learning and understanding how much, I need a budget for money, for food every week and things like that, of course, with inflation. So I guess the lesson is to keep testing and learning until you land on something that's right for you. So another example is like by selling my funds recently, I've really learned how attached you become to having that money in your account. And, but at the same time, with practice comes benefits. So now that I've sold a couple of funds a couple of times, I'm getting a lot more comfortable with the idea of doing that when I actually need the money and when the goal comes into fruition. So that's great.
Love that.
Yeah, thank you. Number 3 is dig into the detail. So funny that you put it as like a lot of people want to know the nitty gritty. So something that I have notoriously been horrible at is just being lazy when it comes to kind of investigating different options of things to buy or before doing the podcast, investments, things to invest in. And I guess a little bit of influence from Ollie, but generally just wanting to understand more what I'm paying and doing more research. So I found myself now, I actually am doing a little bit more research to try to find cheaper alternatives in the interest of knowing that I want to spend that money elsewhere. So that's been really great. And then also just digging into the detail with things like insurance policies. So understanding what my policies allow me to claim on. So a great example is the travel insurance. But also I recently found out with my health insurance that none of my psychology appointments are actually going to be covered. Which took me 2 years to realise, because now I'm actually digging into the details. But in turn, that's meant, okay, I'm going to be decreasing the amount of cover that I have because it doesn't, the level means that I don't actually get any extra benefit from it. So that's an instance of how it's worked out better for me. Number 4 is stop resisting who you are and start shaping your money around it. This was like a come to Jesus moment for me.
Yeah, I was like, is this just lean into the truth?
Yeah, basically. Stop trying to be someone else and own your habits. So
can I also add to that would be, if you're in a relationship, stop trying to, do that for your partner, right? Give them the grace of just maybe understanding that you each have different money habits.
Yes.
And you need to be who you each are.
Yeah.
Right, rather than trying to like merge it and
Force
become a different version of each of yourselves, which is not going to happen.
Yeah, totally. You'll probably just end up in a fight, which no one likes about money. So I've kind of put this in 2 buckets. So I've always had this guilt associated with spending money on things that I genuinely love. And if you're a regular listener to the podcast, you'll know that is primarily around health. So my latest phase is saunas.
I am actually stoked that you just said it was a phase, because I think my biggest learning over the last 2 years is like, how many health-related endeavours has Christine gone on in the last 2 years? We could make a whole reel out of that in itself.
Literally. Oh, we should. It would be so funny. So I'm done feeling guilty for wanting to try every new fad there is, and actually just spend money on myself, really. And so that's one. And then another one is I've also tried to in the past make huge meticulous budgets and stick to them, but I've just landed in a place where I'm not the person that's going to track every single line item, every single purchase. And so I have started taking it in, like, here are the buckets that I work with, and this is generally what I land on every 2 to 4 weeks, whatever, and just understanding that that's how my habits need to work to also not constantly feel guilty about all the things. So that's me.
Great learning.
Yes, thank you. And then finally, you know more than you think. This is more probably just a big hug for myself.
What a positive note to end on.
Yeah, thanks. Little confidence boost. So the background on this is, just because someone says they're an expert, it doesn't mean that they necessarily have their facts straight or that they are. So a beautiful example of this is a lot of financial advisors in New Zealand can't even explain thoroughly what an index fund is. And so, if you're doing a research, and for me personally, it's taken me probably 3.5 years now to get to a point where I actually feel like I'm confident in my knowledge, and the podcast has played a huge part in that. And thanks, Kat, for helping me on the journey.
No worries.
Being my financial
Having
coach.
arguments with you at certain times.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, we're going to do this.
Yeah, being honest.
Yes.
As well as loving.
Exactly.
So that has really helped me to own my knowledge and just actually realize that I can make good decisions for myself, and I don't always need to go out seeking that validation or relying on other people to tell me what to do.
Yeah.
So it's taking ownership of that. And
Love this. I think like that, one thing that just tweaked in my mind is they say when you have a baby, like one of the key things is no one knows your child like you know your child. And so as much as there's advice out there, there is so much parenting advice, and you'll get so much unsolicited parenting advice. It's like, take it all with a grain of salt because no one knows your kid like you know your kid. And it's kind of a little bit the same around, like, this is why we encourage conversations about money, because no one knows your financial situation like you know your financial situation. And to that point, you do need to back yourself and kind of hold your ground a little bit, or have some confidence in your own ability. Also know when to maybe reach out or sense check with someone, particularly if you need someone to call you out on your own bullshit. But yeah, just kind of also knowing that, like, yourself and your money situation. So of course you're going to be a very well placed person to help move forward.
Yes, definitely. I think to that I will add, in some ways, I believe there's a little bit of truth to everything. And so it is valuable for you to reflect on what the person is telling you or suggesting maybe.
Sure.
But ultimately, you need to make that decision for you and your situation, and not just be fed and believe everything you read.
Yes.
That is us. That
Love
was great.
that.
We should do more of this.
I know. 5 lessons,
Yeah.
International Women's Day,
Yes.
2-year anniversary of the podcast, so many milestones.
Yes. I also just want to say a big thank you for listening to the podcast. This wouldn't have been possible without you, with the continued support and likes on Instagram, commenting on the reels, laughing at our jokes, calling us out.
Yeah,
It
we
all
really
contributes.
appreciate it. Yeah. Particularly for all of you that listen and then maybe don't get in touch with us. I see you out there.
Yeah, the lurkers.
But I'm more than happy for that. We hope that, we hope that everyone that has listened to the show in the last 2 years has learned something. We try really hard to be open and honest, and I guess show all of our financial selves. And as Christine mentioned, we are planning to do a lot more money moments with regular human beings, no fancy Kiwis, just regular people in the next 12 months. And so if that's something that, you feel like you have some financial stories that you'd like to share that would help others, we would love to hear from you. Please reach out either on Instagram or at our email, hello@itsnosecret.co.nz. Yes, we will read those emails. But we would, love to hear from people, and I guess a big thank you.
Yep. And we will definitely see you next Tuesday.
We will.
As always.
Bye.
Bye.